Sorry, I didn't know that we were filming. I was just practicing, having fun. My fault. Anyway, welcome to the next lesson. This is Dave Hill. I'm Dave Hill, and I was just enjoying myself, getting ready to teach everybody out there in video land some lessons today. So let's get going. You might have heard what I was playing, had a couple of chord changes that I was playing around and jamming and having fun with, but the key to everything that I was playing there had everything to do with understanding the layout of the scales and the patterns and the roots of all the chords that I play through. Okay? If you don't see the connection of all the chords and the scales, it makes it really difficult to negotiate or to weave through the chords when I'm playing and improvising. So you got to make sure you understand that. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is the layout of the fingerboard, a basic concept, but it's something that's very important to understand. Okay? So I'm going to explain a few things on my guitar, and I'm going to refer back to the board here, and you can see that I've already written out some things for you. But I want to go through a few things now and explain what they are. So first of all, some basic things. I'm going to refer to strings periodically and names of strings, and let's just make sure we understand each other here. For those of you watching at home, you might know this information, but I'm just going to go over it. When I talk about the first string, I'm always talking about the thin string, the high string, and I'm talking about the sixth string, it's the low string. Okay, the lowest string on the guitar. Now, name-wise, that would also refer to the names of the notes. The E string is the first string, the B string is the second string, the G string is the third string, E first, B second, G third, D is the fourth string, A is the fifth string, and E is the sixth string. We're going to get into some notation and how to read the names of the notes in the fingerboard and where they're at eventually. But just so I can talk in the future, those are the names of the notes in the open strings. Okay, so let's talk about where the roots are on the guitar, so we can find roots. Basically refer to the tones, the foundation tone of a chord or a scale. Okay, so when something is said to be in the key of C, that means the harmony, the chords, the fundamental orientation of the sound is based around a tonic of C. Okay, so let's talk about where the notes are. Now remember that I said that this was an E string, and this was a B string, and this was a G string. Okay, so if we follow that logic now, we're going to know that this is the A string. Remember we talked about that. The fifth string is the A string. Okay, so in music there's half steps between two different notes. There's half steps between a B and a C, and there's half steps between E and F. Okay, so if this is the A string, that means that it goes A, B, and then there's a half step here. Okay, so that would make this note a C. Okay, so what I want to show you now is this C note here has another C note right here, which makes sense because, as we know, this is the B string, and there's a half step between B and C, so then that makes sense. There's the roots of C in the open position, and you can see exactly I've written them out. That's a C root, and this is a C root. Now, of course, these are movable, but I'm only using C in this case in the first position to show you that this is the root combination in pattern 1. Now, the reason that's going to become important is because we're going to play a lot of things in a form that relates to these root positions. We're going to play chords like that, right? We're going to play scales like this. And they're all going to relate to particular roots that I'm showing you right now, okay? So that's the first pattern, pattern 1, and that's where the roots would be in a pattern 1 scale. I'm calling it pattern 1 just as an arbitrary number, but I'm always going to be consistent with this. Is always this combination of roots. Whether I play it here, anywhere over the neck will always be referred to as a pattern 1 form, okay? So now check it out. As we go to another set of roots, and these are all open string roots. The next root combination is going to be the roots that relate to the open A string, and the next fretted A in that same position would be right here. Okay? So check it out. That's an open A, which is essentially this note right here below the nut, and this A right here, the second fret of the G string. Okay, so that becomes our second root combination, and then we call that pattern 2. Okay? And you'll recognize that root combination from chords like this, right? I'm going to show you how this all fits together with chords, but I'm sure you've played or you're going to play that chord soon. Okay, so that's pattern 2. Okay, these are all open string or open position root positions. Okay, so once again, we'll use that in a different position, but we're going to still call it pattern 2. So, for example, this root combination could be played, if you think about it like that, could be played here. Right? Here's the same root combination, the same fingering, but now we're in the root combination C. So here's the first position of the roots of C, and notice how when I played the second pattern of C, one of the notes overlapped, right? And that's where we're going to see a connection unfolding here. Okay, so this is pattern 1. And this is pattern 2 as we move it up the neck, or in open position, pattern 2. Okay, now let's go up to pattern 3 and see what the root combination looks like. Okay, and once again, open position here. If we look at the roots here in open position, we can find that there's 3 combinations that line up perfectly together. The low G's on the 3rd fret of the high E and the low E string, and then the open G on the 3rd string, okay? And that becomes the basis for a lot of scales and chords that we're going to be comfortable with. But in the open position, you'll probably recognize the G chord coming out of that one, okay? But that could be more than just a G major chord. Obviously, it could be movable, and we're going to show you how to do that. But this is going to be what we call pattern 3, okay? So we've got pattern 1 now in open position, pattern 2 in open position, and pattern 3 in open position. It actually has 3 roots, 3 positions of the tonic in one fingering position. Okay? So that's going to set us up nicely to move these chords in higher positions eventually. Okay, moving on now to pattern 4, you'll see we have another 3 roots, but 2 of them are actually the open strings, the open E. Right? So the inside root that we can grab is right here, right there on the 2nd fret of the D string. So that forms 3 roots here in the outside E's and the middle E on the D string. And you might recognize that root pattern from a chord like this where you play an E chord. Okay, very typical of an open E chord. Okay, but those are where the roots are. There's 3 of them, the outside strings and the inside E. Okay, so that's what we call pattern 4. Okay, so once again, all the open roots to review. We have pattern 1, pattern 2, A, pattern 3, G, and we just talked about pattern 4. Okay, so these are all the basis for a lot of the open position chords you're going to play, but eventually they become bar chords that we'll talk about. Okay? Then finally, the last pattern is pattern 5. Okay? Now pattern 5, you notice back to just 2 roots in this position. There's the open D root and then the fretted D. Okay, so that brings us into this combination. Okay? Only 2 roots there. But once again, if you played an open string chord, you'd probably recognize it from that shape. But the open root would be as if you fingered it right like that. Okay, I'm doing that to show you that, not because I would ever finger it like that, but just to show you that eventually it will move, and then you'll use that fingering there to grab the root. Okay? So that's basic stuff, but very, very important to learn and drill when you're first absorbing all this information, because if you don't appreciate and really study it carefully, it tends to get lost because you think, oh, I want to learn how to play a lot of cool licks and riffs and everything. That's so easy. I know that already. But it's really not as simple as that. There's a lot more to it. So you got to make sure you really drill it and understand it, because once we start moving these root positions all over the neck, you'll see how much more complex it can get. Okay? So for example, now I showed you all these roots here. Right? Let's make sure that we understand how they relate to chords. Okay? Perhaps we can go over to a board and I can show you some of the chord formers, but I'm going to show you them right now on my guitar, and we'll refer to a chord form diagram we're going to have to look at as well. So the first root position was right here, and as we know, we had a nice chord that fits into that. If you took a pin here and filled out the entire chord, we'd have this would be a C chord, right? You can see I'm going to circle the root here, or the roots, and this is actually a complete C chord, an open string C chord. But notice that these notes here could also ring as part of the chord, because they're part of the voicing, the part of the notes that sound good in the chord. Okay, so this root now is getting filled out into a complete chord, and this is C major. Okay? Okay? And this basically is a chord that's built off of the root, the major third, and the perfect fifth of a scale. In this case, it's a C major chord. Okay, so let's fill out the rest of these roots here to make chords. Okay, there's our open root here and our fretted root here, so we can assume now this is going to be some kind of A chord, and in fact, it's an A major chord when we do this. When we go, fill this note in here. This is our second root here. And then this is the third of the chord. And basically, that becomes a nice open A chord in the open position, and that's a pattern 2 open position A chord. Okay? I'm sure you've played that chord before, but you can play it with a variety of different bars there, but I like to do it probably with my first finger. Okay? Moving on here, we have the pattern 3 shape, and we knew the roots were here. Now check it out. There's a lot of extra notes. We just can't go like this. I mean, it's pretty close to being a G chord. There's a lot of open strings that are available in this position that relate to the G, right? But they're not quite all there, so let's fill out the rest of them. There's the third of the chord. And there's another third here as an open string, but the roots, as we know, are right there. So here's the whole chord. This could be a big open folky G chord, and this is based off pattern 3. Okay, some people also like to add that note in there like this, and then you don't have the B ringing, you have the D, which becomes the 5th, which is actually kind of nice, because then you get a little bit more information about the chord. That's probably the way I would play it most of the time. Okay, so notice how every one of these roots here are becoming full chords, open chords. Okay? Moving on to pattern 4.